Hey everyone! In case you didn't know, I love texturing. There are a ton of ways to go about it. How I texture is by assigning a base color to all the objects first, organizing the UVs into groups, baking out base color texture images, and then doing all the fun detail work on those. So, let's get into it. Let's start by sorting out our eye texture. Select our eye object and tab into edit mode. I have the bottom panel set to the UV editor. Hit U over the viewport and choose unwrap. In the materials tab, create a new material. Name it something appropriate. Switch this bottom area to the shader editor. Add an image texture node. Open our eye texture, which we made using nodes, here. Link in the description if you missed that. I've since joined both eyes together into one image. This will also work just fine if you have the eye texture separate. You'll just have to apply your mirror modifier once you have the UVs set up and make a separate texture for each eye. If you have this setting on repeat, the textures will wrap back around on themselves. So for this situation, I chose to change the setting to clip. That'll stop the extra eyes showing up in the corners. Go back into the UV editor. I spent a while messing with the UVs a bit. It didn't quite work how I wanted it to, so I'm just going to go into front ortho view, hit U, and project from view. Scale up the UVs and position in here somewhere. If you're using a single combined eye texture like me, set the mirror to U. Mirror U just flips the UV along the texture center line, and there we go. Let's start making some base materials. Select your eyelash, create a new material, and choose a black color. Assign this color to her lower eyelash and her eyebrows as well. Her eyes look slightly too big, so scale up the UVs on the X-axis. It's crazy how much better she looks with just her eyes and stuff textured in. She'd pass as a totally acceptable anime character at this point, so we're done. Just kidding. Assign this black material to her hair objects as well. Select these two vertices and join them with J. Hit this plus sign over here to add another material. This is going to be the color for the shaved parts of her hair. Click this new material button and name it. Click the base color and choose a light grayish purple. With the main hair object selected, tab into edit mode. Use face select and select all these faces. Make sure the second material is highlighted and hit assign here. Select these faces, select the new material and hit assign. With the colors assigned, we can clearly see how our faces look. Might want to switch to vertex select and edge slide stuff around to smooth out these shapes. Move anything that seems out of place. Select the ribbon and make a new material. Name and choose a ribbon color. Create a material for her skin. Add this skin color to her hand object. You can add this material to her legs as well, but I'm gonna wait for now. These faces on her neck will eventually be skin colored as well, but let's not add it quite yet. Add the black color to her coat, add the black to her boots as well, and the fluffy bit on her coat. Also select this inner coat object and assign the black material. Hide this collar object. Select this object and tab into edit mode. Go back into material viewport shading and add the black material to this object. Hit Alt H to unhide. Select and hide the coat objects. Select the dress object. Add a material slot to this object in edit mode. Create a new material. Choose a pink color. With face select active, choose a face up here and hit Ctrl L. Add another material slot. Add the skin material to the second slot. Hit assign. Do the same on her neck. Hide her dress object. Select her legs and tab into edit mode. Create a new material, name, and choose a black-gray color. Select a face on her lower legs, hit Ctrl L, add a new material slot. Choose the skin color, hit assign. Unhide. Add a material slot to the boot object. Select a face on the bottom, hit Ctrl L, select the second slot, choose the ribbon material for now, and hit assign. Click this duplicate button, rename this material, choose a different color that's closer to the shoe. Select these buttons, create a new light gray material. Select the detail objects on her shoe, create a new material slot, and add the detail gray color to that slot. Hit assign while selected on the gray color. Select the back faces of these objects, either in the 3D viewport or in the UV editor, and assign the gray color. Select and assign the color to the shoe spikes. Assign the black color to the ribbons, create a new material slot, and add the gray color to it. Assign the gray color to the side parts of this object. Add the gray color to the other coat detail objects. Make a new color for her backpack. Let's lighten it up a little bit. Add the backpack color to the straps. Add the backpack color to the ribbon detail as well. Add another material slot and assign the gray color from the detail to these side things. Turn on snapping to vertex and snap this bottom vertex to the backpack one. Switch to edge snapping and snap the top vertex to this edge. I decided to shape my strap a little bit more. Make sure snapping is off. That's better. Assign the gray color to this object. The backpack color will work on the earring. Add the black color to her necklace. Add the gray color to this thing. Her eyes and skin color kinda blend together. I think that just might be the material view lighting, but to be safe I want to adjust it a little. So I added a few nodes to darken the whites of her eyes slightly. I'm about to join all of my hair pieces together, but then I end up separating them again later, so I'd recommend keeping them all separate from the beginning. If you decide to join them, tab into edit mode on the main hair object, select all, and choose to select boundary loops. Hit Ctrl E and mark these as seams. Mark the boundary loop on this object as well. My ribbon's origin was weird, so I moved it to geometry. Before you join objects together, it's important to make sure they have the same modifiers. Again, I'd recommend keeping the objects separate, but if you choose to join them together, make sure you apply your mirror modifiers ahead of time. But I'd skip this part if I were to do it again. Here's where I selected these in object mode and joined them together with Ctrl J. If you want to get rid of the creases at the seams between objects you've joined together, with all of the pieces selected, hit M and choose by distance. I also prepped all the code objects for joining together by selecting the boundary edges and marking as seams, and then joining the geometry. I was hoping it'd make rigging easier to manage, but it actually made it a bit more complicated, and I ended up separating them all again anyways, so skip this part too. Select the 3 hair objects, or 1 if you join them together, and tab into edit mode. Go into the UV editor in this bottom area. This is where I decided to separate my ribbon from the hair again. Select all the hair faces and hit U to unwrap them again. Blender will automatically sort them to occupy a decent amount of your texture space. But if you want to make any adjustments, switch to face select down here, select a face on an island, and hit Ctrl L to select the entire island. Now you can move stuff around as you do with any object and organize your UVs how you want. Anything that is visually obscured on your model can be scaled down to take up less of the texture. Anything that you want higher detail, you can scale up. Just make sure that they all fit into your texture. If any of your islands seem unusually sized in comparison to the others, you probably accidentally scaled that object in object mode. You can fix this by applying the scale on all your objects, select your objects, hit Ctrl A, and choose Scale. As I unwrapped my objects, I hid them so I could remember what was finished. The next texture is going to have her head, eyelashes, eyebrows, mouth, teeth, and tongue. So select all of those, tab into edit mode, select all, and unwrap with U. Organize your UVs. I've noticed a lot of times I see game models organize their UVs into areas based on base color. There's a Blender add-on called UV Squares, which adds a bunch of unwrapping options. It's pretty handy for unwrapping your objects into a grid formation. The benefit of this is pretty minimal, unless you're trying to get the absolute most out of your texture space. There won't be much texturing on her eyelashes and eyebrows, so they can be scaled down a bit. I want to unwrap our mouth objects like we did earlier. Select and hide her head, go into side view, hit U and choose project from view to unwrap the teeth. Unwrap her tongue and mouth from top view. Move these objects off of each other. Select all of our head objects again and tab into edit mode. Select all and organize the UVs. I decided to organize my objects into groups to make it easier to search for them during texturing. Select all the body objects and unwrap them into one texture. Time to organize our UVs. This process takes a bit of messing around. I chose to put the backpack, earring, necklace, and ribbons into one texture. Select and tab into edit mode, select all, and unwrap. This strap object is a good candidate for the UV Square add-on. If you're giving it a try, turn off sync selection. Select all and snap to axis. Look how tidy that looks. Organize to your heart's content. And I guess we should make a group for these objects as well. I decided to make use of some gradients in my materials before baking. Here's my node setup for the dress gradient. I'm using a second UV map, which you just add over here in the UV maps. This is what the second UV map looks like. I just projected from front view and made sure the island stretched across the image, so that the gradient would match up with the color ramp. Make sure the camera icon is highlighted on your original UV map, and add a UV map node with the second UV map to the gradient material. The shoes are similar. I made a second UV map where I just scaled up the bottom of the shoes. I also made a gradient for the backpack straps, but the UV stretched across the image anyway, so no second UV map necessary. Alright, let's get ready to bake. Turn off all the Marnie collections except for the face textures. Open up the image editor, click new, name, and size this image. I went with 512 pixels. Go back into the shader editor, add an image texture node with the new texture active to every material used in this collection. With the node selected, hit Ctrl C to copy. Switch into the material tab so that we can see the material list. Move through each object and make sure every material has this node. With the mouse over this material, hit Ctrl V to paste the node. I forgot to make a material for the mouth objects, so let's do that now. Choose a base color. It's never too late to shade smooth and recalculate the normals. I went with flipping them inside since we'll only ever see the inside of her mouth. Check where the UV is located so the gradient is easier to make. Make a material for the tongue. Add some nodes. Switch the color ramp to constant and adjust the stops until you can see the two colors. Choose a new light color. Switch the ramp back to linear and adjust the location of the stops. I'm going to lighten up this dark color. Let's do the same with the teeth. Shade smooth. Create a new material. Also name these materials. I oftentimes forget to do this and lose track of what they are. Add nodes. I want to rotate this gradient slightly. Add a vector rotate node. Here's where our teeth are located. We already know our middle point is 0.5, 0.5. Maybe that'll be close enough for what we're doing. Change the center to 0.5, 0.5. Rotate the angle a little bit. Move the stops to adjust the gradient. Change the black color to some sort of mouth color. Switch to linear and adjust the color ramp. You can add a middle point color if you want, something lighter. Adjust it all however you want. Alright, now continue adding the image node to the materials. Switch into the UV editor. Head over to the Render Properties tab. Switch the bake settings to diffuse and uncheck direct and indirect. This margin setting is how many pixels the bake extends beyond the UV islands. Since I unwrap my islands close together, I turned this setting down a bit. And Clear Image will clear the image before the bake begins. Select all the head objects in the outliner and hit bake. Now we wait as our bake renders. Looks like there's some room to spare, so I turned the margin up to 6 and rebaked. 4 would have been fine though. If your margin is too small, sometimes you can see the outside color bleeding onto your seams. This time I also enabled Clear Image, which got rid of the black background. Save your textures after baking and frequently while texturing. Changes you make won't be saved until you manually save the texture. Saving your blend file won't save the textures. Losing a texture is one of the biggest bummers when first learning Blender. Now that our texture is saved, we can scrap our old materials and just use one new one for our head objects. Go into the shader editor and the material tab. You can do this two ways. Strip the materials off your objects and add a new one, or leave the old materials and add a new slot and material to your objects. If you do choose to remove the old materials, they will be deleted upon closing Blender, so keep that in mind. Call your new material something that makes sense. Add an image texture, open your face texture, connect to the base color of the shader. Select all in edit mode and hit assign while selected on the new material. Since I'm fine losing my old materials, I'm going to remove them. Add the face material to each of the face objects. Don't forget her mouth, teeth, and tongue. Now let's bake the hair. Create a new texture. I made mine 256 by 256 pixels, but it seemed a little low res, so I ended up rebaking it as 512 by 512. Add this texture to the image node and all of the hair materials. Some of these materials we were using for the face, so they'll have a texture node with the face texture. Just switch these nodes over to the new hair texture. I don't need the ribbon material, so I deleted it from the hair. Switch to the UV editor and bake. This is me making my second higher res hair texture, putting in all the hair materials and baking again. Go back into the shader editor, remove the textures from the hair objects, or object in my case, create a new material, and add the hair texture to this material. The eyes are done, so let's move on to the body. Create a new texture. I found 1024 by 1024 to be more than enough. Don't forget to add this texture to every body material. I think I might have lost the footage for coloring her nails black, or I didn't record it. I don't know. But color her nails black. Keep adding the body texture to the body materials. Here's our UV map. Now hit bake and wait. Always save. Strip the materials from each of the body objects. Create a new material and add the body texture. Remove the old material. Strip the materials and add the new one to all the body objects. Alright, on to the next group. Create a new image. 512 by 512 seemed to work well. Like before, add this new texture to every material. When every material has this texture node, hit bake. I had some issues baking because I forgot to put the texture node on the ribbon material. Don't forget to save. Strip off the old materials and make a new one with the new detail texture. Add this material to all of these detail objects, and we're ready for texturing. Turn on all the Marnie collections. Her hair is messed up in my file. This sometimes will happen when two textures become strangely linked. If this ever happens, you can fix it by changing the outliner view to Blender file, opening up images, selecting our two hair textures, and deleting them. Hit open on the image texture and navigate to the correct texture. Connect up, switch the outliner back to the view layer, and now she is ready to texture. Switch the bottom area to the image editor. Open up whichever texture you want to work on first. I'm going to start with her face. Switch from object mode over to texture paint mode. The tool tab has a bunch of adjustable settings for our brushes. Like the stroke type and brush fall off, I generally don't need to change too much. Here we can change our brush color. I'm going to use a light peach color to start adding some of the detail to her skin. Switch this drop down from view to paint, and now we can paint on the texture or the model directly. Over here we have our other paint tools to choose from. I mostly use the brush and soften tool, but the smear tool is occasionally handy as well. Select the soften tool and brush all over this to soften up our color transitions. It's sometimes so subtle as to potentially be unnoticeable. I'm not even sure if it's doing anything right now, but it makes me feel better. Switch back to the brush tool and choose a fairly dark brown to draw in some of the creases on her face. Hitting F lets you adjust your brush size. Paint a light edge around her mouth. Perhaps it'll go better painting on the texture image. Use soften to blend them in. Make sure to go off the edge of the UV a little bit so there's no light area down the middle. If it looks weird at first, don't worry, that's completely normal. Use this sample tool to sample her cheek color. Shade a little bit under her nose and blend it together. Get an even darker shade and give her nose some more color. Use soften wherever you find necessary as you go. Sample the brown color and draw a crease down her nose. Soften this a bit. I want to find the crease below her eyebrow, which is easier to see in solid shading. Soften and refine your lines as needed. It can sometimes help to write down what colors you're using, But you can also sample the colors you've used straight off your textures. We're going to keep on texturing. I'll put the approximate color hex code we're using on screen. Pay attention to what tool we're using as we go, and soften anything that you want blent together. I'll just chime in when anything unusual happens. Remember to save often. Here I'm just adjusting the strength of my brush so I can slightly paint out her cheek blush color, and then smooth better. Adjust the strength back to 1 for the bottom part of the ear, drop the strength for the upper ear. That looks good for her face texture. Let's click this drop down menu and choose her hair texture. We need to blend her hairline in, so sample her hair color. Switch back to the face texture. Paint this color in along the edge. This UV line is where her head ends, so we're going to try to go over that slightly. It is incredibly difficult to tell if it's blending correctly because of my settings, but it is. You can see in object mode that the colors now transition nicely from the face to the hair object. It's also important to remember that you can only paint on the object you're currently selected on. Some of the shading on the back of her hair doesn't look the best. It should look better if we mark these back edges as sharp. And add an edge split modifier with edge angle unchecked to the hair object. Yeah, that's better. The default smear tool is pretty good for doing this part in the hair. Enabling X symmetry allows us to paint both sides simultaneously if we paint directly on our model. Turn off symmetry when you're done with it. Don't want any mishaps. Remember to save frequently. Hit this little circle arrow to switch the active color. The hair's done. Make sure to save it. Let's move on to texturing our hands now. Select and hide the coat. Open up the body texture. Switch the off color to the fingernail color. Flip the color order. My monitor has some color issues, so it's hard to tell some of our skin colors apart, so feel free to blend these together better. Don't forget to save. Time to texture the dress, so hide any object that's in the way. We're going to paint in a straight line, so change the stroke method from space to line. Click drag to draw a line. Hit Alt to conform to 45-degree increments. Once you're done with the straight lines, switch back to space as the stroke method. Switch back to line. I guess we're going back to space for now. Now back to line. And space again, just get these rough shapes eyeballed in. Remember to save constantly. Now to move on to texturing her legs. That's the legs done. Save your texture and let's move on to the boots. Turn on the mask setting. Enable Paint Mask. Right-click to select a face. Select the brush tool, and now only the masked faces can be painted on. This will keep us from drawing all over the silver things with this color. Hold Shift while selecting faces to select multiple. I'm gonna paint myself little swatches over here so I can easily sample the colors I'm using later. You can use line as the stroke method for this part if you prefer. But I think I'm gonna go back to space. I decided to get rid of this sharp edge here. We want to give this metal some blue-green shine. Here's something that I should have probably done a little earlier. Let's change our viewport settings to show the true color of our textures without lighting. Switch to solid viewport shading, change to flat lighting, and texture color. Additionally, you could disable outlines in this menu. You could also turn off fade and active geometry in the viewport overlays dropdown. I painted in these colors as swatches so I don't lose track of them later. Make sure your brush strength is at 100% to get the true color. Adjust the strength back down. My coat fluff kinda clips into her backpack, so I'm gonna try to fix that real quick. And then reposition this button detail so it's not clipping as well. Back to texturing. Time to move on to her coat. I switched to a different viewport shading so the coat details were easier to make out. Control Z is undo if you mess anything up. I use the smear tool here to kinda smudge the dark color all over. Save all the time, but specifically right now. Make sure to save often, like right now. Adjust this thing's shape real quick to get rid of any clipping. As you go, adjust brush strength accordingly. I'm more or less just saving after every object. Just save all the time. Save constantly. Time to save. Now it's time to move on to our backpack. It's slightly difficult to tell which side is which on the UV, so I just drew a check mark on the inside real quick. Switch your stroke method between line and space when it makes sense, and color in the backside. Drop the strength and try to get a bit of the gradient onto the top of the strap. Switch the stroke method back and forth between space and line as needed. Draw in some lighter lines with lower strength. Drop a save real fast. Now to space. Switch back to space. And back to line for some of these lines. I hit this button by accident and then was completely lost for a second. Now is as good a time as any to feed my saving addiction. Might as well save the texture if you're happy with it. Paint in a quick swatch. Save! Almost done, just need to finish your jewelry. Onto the earring, which is pretty easy. Mask this face. Turn off the mask, soften this up a bit. Save, and there we have it, texturing complete. Thank you for joining me on this texturing adventure. Please subscribe and like the video, I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks again, stay safe, I love you all, goodbye.